Kia ora and welcome to another episode of Rural New Zealand, proudly brought to you by Cowfields. I'm your host Scotty Manford. Join me as we check out what's happening throughout Canterbury. Alrighty, on this week's episode we talk to Harman lawyers about the latest laws and regulations. We go fencing with a farmer as he tests out some new equipment. The High Country lures us in for a 4x4 tour. But first we're in Fairlie where we meet one of the finalists for the South Island Farmer of the Year. Lynn and Neil Campbell have been farming up the road from Fairlie for over 20 years.
520 hectares we bought in 1993, and then 10 years later in 2003 we bought an adjoining 240 hectares. So that addition gave us a really good balance. Where we are standing now is quite high altitude country, going up to 600 metres way over there. It wasn't a well balanced farm before, good summer country but not so good in the winter, bit of snow risk and what have you. So the additional 240 hectares we got are in the valley, Middle Valley itself, and it's really made this farm what it is and opened up a whole lot of different options for us. Yeah.
By having more options, this gives the Campbells more avenues to pursue on the farm.
It's our point of difference and why we're entering this competition. People say, what do you farm? And I actually say we grow protein to produce protein, and we can farm anything here. We've geared ourselves up now. We've got 80 hectares of arable crops. We run a venison herd. We do dairy support with heifers and a small number of sheep, and I guess we have trading cattle, which is our escape valve in times of adverse climate, and they come and go as seasons dictate. But just talking about the deer, we're on this high altitude country, and when we introduced the deer onto the farm in the late 90s, it just fitted like a glove because the hinds, they breed late, November, December fawning, so their feed demand is quite different, and so those hinds are really suited to this high altitude country where we are now, and so yeah, it's been a process of refinement to get to where we have today with what we run and how much.
Growing deer and producing venison is the main focus for the Campbells.
Behind us is our breeding hinds, which we run about 500 of, and they've just come off fodder beet, which is, I talked about the different feed demand from the other classes of animal. So they've been on fodder beet now all winter until the second week of October, and we started to kill last year's crop. So as they're coming off, they're making room for the hinds, and they'll be spread out in the next fortnight ready for fawning. We've concentrated entirely on venison production. There's some really exciting things happening genetically with venison. Traditionally, most of the focus on deer breeding had been on velvet genetics, and great gains can be made in velvet because you're selecting purely just on that one trait. But now we're getting some really good work. Some breeders are doing some really good work on venison and on the weaning weight of the fawn, and then that consequently gives you a heavier fawn in the autumn when you wean, and then you've got more chance of hitting the premium chilled spring market, which finishes about the end of October, early November for shipping to Europe. So we aim to get as many animals away as we can in that period, early spring, up till about the first week of November. And with what's happening genetically, it's really exciting. We're going to be able to get more animals away, heavier, in that peak kill period. It's exciting. The future's pretty exciting about it, really.
Another aspect to the farm is supplying grazing for the local dairy farmers.
These are dairy heifers that we're grazing for replacements for dairy farmers, and it's been part of our business now for 6 or 7 years. It's a very reputation-based business, so we're aiming for optimum performance and get them to the live weights that the dairy farmers require, particularly pre-mating. And I guess grazing somebody else's livestock, I feel a greater onus than if they were mine. I feel it's a real responsibility to get them what the client's always right. So you're trying to please the client, and that in this case it's the dairy farmer. So we put a fair emphasis on reaching target live weights. Our grazing system that we're using here is a wee bit unique for this class of country in that we have the farm all divided up into cells, and the greatest cell's probably 2 hectares, so they're on regular shifts, maximum of 2 days per cell, and so we're trying to maximise the amount of grass we grow, the live weight gain of the animals, and obviously kilograms of meat or live weight gain per hectare. And by what we've done through electric fencing, we're able to achieve that. I guess I've always looked upon our traditional dairy farmers as the best growers and utilisers of grass in New Zealand, and so we're trying to emulate their system and grow the greatest amount of grass for the greatest amount of product. One of the things we did a few years ago was a SWOT analysis of this farm, strengths, weaknesses and threats, and all the talk of climate change and what have you, and more extreme weather patterns, and obviously droughts are part of that. And so we looked at this farm as a total, and we had some tremendous soils, particularly in the valley, some Claremont silt loams which were basically growing grass for livestock, which I didn't think was the best utilisation of it because it still needed regular rainfall to grow grass. So we basically started some arable cropping, autumn sowing of arable crops, and really protecting us against those extreme summer events. And by autumn sowing we've managed to achieve some pretty consistent yields with wheat, barley, oilseed rape, and we're growing some oats for seed this year. So it's really given this property some insulation against drought, and a side benefit of grain for your own use and straw as well to be fed to livestock. So you can see there's oilseed rape there in the background, and I talked before about the neighbouring property we bought in 2003, and this is basically all it underneath us here. It is much more summer dry than where we've been, where we started, but nowhere near as snow prone, so we make sure we have a percentage of winter brassicas, fodder beet and what have you down on the valley floor here, and it's relatively quickly cleared of snow. A few sheep in the background, they're still part of the mix. At one stage this farm had 3,500 sheep breeding ewes, and we're down to 600, just going to a terminal sire. My accountant tells me I've only got them for sentiment, but as the numbers went down, their per head performance went up, and they're still here and tidy up round the lanes and do contribute. As their per head production's gone up, they still do contribute, and they're another class of livestock that can give us some flexibility in the terms of adverse events. So we can unload them, just buying in replacements and mating to a terminal sire.
With lush green paddocks, not a breath of wind, it seemed like we were in a special little part of the world.
It's an amazing place to live. I mean, if you look around and see the views, we're extremely lucky to live here. I love the diversity, the different stock classes, and the actual community around here is absolutely brilliant. We really enjoy living here.
Yeah. Is there any animals in particular like growing on the farm?
Well, Neil's quite passionate about deer, and even though I don't get in and help him at all with them, I love watching the deer, and they're really interesting.
And I guess this is our piece of paradise, our farm, our business.
All the best for the competition, and we'll see you on the 16th of November for finals night. Alrighty, stay tuned on Rural New Zealand because we're still down in Fairlie where we check out an old musterer's hut. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Rural New Zealand. Now we certainly live in a beautiful country and there's a lot of gems out there just waiting to be discovered. And one of these gems to be discovered was in Fairlie. Just off the Geraldine to Fairlie highway was a 4x4 tour that journeys through some spectacular farmland on the Four Peaks station. This station is by no means small, totalling 5,300 hectares. This land is home to the Four Peaks walking track and what we came to see today, the Sutherland Hut experience.
It's a 5,300 hectare station and we run sheep, cattle and deer. We've owned it for 15 years now, and this tourism venture is just an aside to what we really do, every day. It's just we've had people, ask about getting out here, so it's a way of getting people out here to enjoy it as well. So the Sutherland's Hut experience is a new tourism venture, and we bring people out here from the Farm Barn Cafe. It's about a 35-minute drive by four-wheel drive, a nice safe four-wheel drive trip. Not up hills or anything. And when they get here, they experience this old hut. The Sutherland's Hut was built in 1866, so it's 150 years old this year. It was originally made of a clay slurry and amongst the river stones, and the floor was earthen, and the roof was thatched, and they had little gaps in the windows, but no windows. It was just netting, so it was quite cold. The roof's been changed 2 or 3 times. It was originally thatched and then they put tin on it, and when Steve did it up, he lined it, battered it, put bats in it and lined it with his Oregon timber.
So what would have been the original purpose of this hut?
This was originally a boundary keeper's hut, so they used to come and stay out. One man and his dog and his horse would stay here for a month, 2 months on end. He'd be given his rations, flour, bag of flour, treacle, old scones, and they'd kill their own meat from the sheep that they're protecting the boundary for.
One of the highlights for many people on the tour is seeing the farmer using the heading dog and hunt away with whistle and voice commands to work the sheep into a pen. The hunt away, which is special to New Zealand, does what the name suggests, pushes the stock away, and the heading dog guides the sheep into position. It must be great seeing people's reactions when they see this farming task happen right in front of them.
It's quite encouraging when you can get people out of the cities and they really have very little experience. Even New Zealand city people now don't know what this country is like. They don't know what it is like farming in the high country and the way we look after and care for the high country and care for our stock. You couldn't get anything more organic than this. It's New Zealand high country at its best, really.
And while being out in the wilderness with this outstanding scenery and a table full of food, I definitely thought it was time to sit down with the other members of our party and enjoy the fantastic food that had been prepared for us. The Sutherland Hut is also one of the stops on the Four Peaks walking track.
The walking track we started in 2006 is when we opened it. When we first bought Four Peaks, we could see the potential right away for, people enjoying it out here like we do. So we did all the huts up. They're all pretty run down, and we get up to 200 people every year now coming, doing this. It takes them 4 days to walk right round, and we carry their gear for them. They just take a little backpack with their lunch and their wet weather gear in it, so it's all easy walking. Well, it's tramping, but it's made a little bit easier because they don't have to carry their big packs.
Yeah. How big is the tramp exactly? Roughly?
It's 4 days. The first 2 days are 15 k's each, and the second 2 days are 10 k's. So they get time to get to the huts and enjoy the huts and cook their own steak on the barbecue and have a few wines and enjoy life.
Enjoy this beautiful scenery. And it must be cool seeing the reactions on people's faces when they come out and do these kind of things.
Yeah, they all love it. It's just so different to what a lot of them are urban people, and they just don't even realise what sort of country's out here, really. Yeah.
And what do you love personally about the trip, or even the four-wheel drive and the walking? What do you love most?
We just love the huts themselves and the hills, and hope that other people like them as much, and they do. They just seem to get the same buzz that we do. It's about a 2.5 to 3 hour trip for them, and it's so far out into the high country, yet it only takes half an hour to get here. You feel like you're miles away.
With world-class scenery, this is definitely one trip I would recommend. A big thanks for showing us around. It was such an awesome day filled with history and lovely food for lunch. Alrighty, stay tuned on Rural New Zealand because after the break we're talking to Harmans lawyers and we're down on the farm where we test out one of the newest staple guns on the market. See you guys then. Welcome back to Rural New Zealand. Now every now and then the law gets changed. Lucky for us, Harmans lawyers are up to speed and have some great tips.
My name's Michael and I'm a graduate solicitor in one of the property and commercial teams here, and I help people with buying and selling properties and drafting wills and anything like that.
What do you want to tell us about the Home Start program?
Yes, so the Home Start grant is a grant offered by the government to first home buyers who are looking to get a bit of a leg up when it comes to buying their first property. So it's available to someone who's been contributing to KiwiSaver for a number of years and has been contributing the minimum requirements, which is 3% of their income. So the Home Start grant, to be eligible for that, you need to have been in KiwiSaver for at least 3 years, and you essentially get $1,000 for each year that you've been in the scheme if you're looking to buy an existing property. So if you've been in the scheme for 3 years, you're potentially eligible for $3,000, 4 years, $4,000, 5 years, $5,000, and that's doubled for new homes to $6,000, $8,000 and $10,000, and it caps off at that. You're allowed to buy the property with one other person, so if you're buying, with your partner or your husband or wife, you're potentially looking at getting $20,000 together if you've both been in KiwiSaver for 5 years.
Yeah. And do you have to pay that money back, or what's the go with that?
So it's only available to someone who's intending to live in the property. So if you're intending to live in the property, that's when the scheme is available, but it's actually structured as a loan. But essentially what happens is if you spend 6 months living in that home, then that's completely written off and you don't have to pay that back.
And earlier this year they changed sort of a few of the rules and stuff about it?
Yes, so they rejigged some of the criteria. So some of the other restrictions in place. You have to be earning under a certain amount of money in terms of your income, and the property caps off at a certain price limit, and both of those have been raised. So for example, if you're buying a property just by yourself, you can now earn income up to $85,000, or if you're buying as a couple, it's $130,000. One of the other things that they've introduced is the raising of the price cap. So depending where you're buying your property, that means that there's a certain amount of restrictions that apply in different areas. So for example, if you're looking to buy a property in, say, Christchurch or the Waimaka area or Salmon districts, you're looking at buying, the cap is $500,000 for an existing property, and it's $550,000 for a new build. For other areas of the country, such as if you're looking to buy in Huranui or Ashburton, that cap's a little bit lower, so you're looking at $400,000 for an existing property and $450,000 for a newer one.
That's pretty good, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think that's an acknowledgement by the government that it's getting a bit harder to buy properties. Property prices are going up.
Can you briefly explain the new changes in the residential tax?
So the residential land withholding tax is a tax that recently came through this year, and essentially it's a tax on offshore persons who are looking to sell their property, and there's a couple of criteria that determines whether or not you have to pay this tax, and they are, firstly, if you're an offshore person; secondly, if you have acquired the property within the last 2 years and you're selling it within that time frame, and the third criteria is that if you have acquired that property after the 1st of October 2015. So there's a couple of hoops you have to jump to see whether or not you're potentially going to have to pay this tax.
So yeah, the best bet would come to see you guys. And
yeah, I think so. I mean, before you even sign a contract, it's good to talk to your solicitor and sort of see whether or not you might have to pay this tax, because it's very complicated, particularly when trusts or companies are involved, because that's when you need to start having to think, is there anyone involved, whether they're shareholders, trustees, beneficiaries or offshore people, because then you're potentially going to have to pay this tax, which in some instances is 10% of the purchase price. So whenever you're thinking about buying or selling a property, I mean, there's always a number of changes that are being made, and I think the earlier you see your solicitor, the better, because it allows you to sort of line up everything and make sure everything's ready to go, because Home Start grants, KiwiSaver withdrawals, they'll take a number of time, and of course if you're selling your property you might have to pay this tax, and it pays to think about these things before you've actually signed a contract.
Once again, some great advice from Harmans lawyers. Alrighty, with summer just around the corner, farmers, now's the time to think about finishing your fencing projects.
Tawanui farm, it's about 420 hectares, just sheep, beef and a bit of deer. You typically run about 3,500 stock units, but it's run mainly as a finishing and trading operation. So we do obviously budget for quite a bit of fencing throughout the year. A lot of the farm's fences are sort of run down and need a renewal, so we sort of pick and choose those where we can. We've also got quite a lot of forestry, shelter belts and woodlots and stuff that we're constantly milling, so they normally take a few of your fences out, obviously. So
You've had this for a few weeks now and you've been given a good test run?
yeah, I have. No, I was when the chance came to give it a bit of a trial, I jumped at it. Been really impressed. Obviously the main benefits of it are the speed compared to a hammer, but just some other features too. It's obviously really well built, pretty durable. I've had it crashing around the front of the bike and stuff like that. Just little things like you push that wee button there, it tells you your battery, your gas tank to charge and stuff like that. The main thing I think that's probably a big benefit from the older models is that it's cordless as well. You don't have to carry a air compressor, hose, all that kind of thing around. So the whole concept's really good, really easy to use, to reload, adjustable end nozzles for how long your staples go into the post, and also an end for your insulator and stuff as well. So yeah, it's sort of very versatile and been really impressed with it. It's very safe too, so it won't let you fire it until you've hold it in on the post, which is a good feature, I think. So you can't just go off shooting anything and willy-nilly. Really easy to use. Got a bit of weight to it, but you can easily hold it with one hand to manoeuvre your wires and whatnot. So no, I've been really impressed with it, and the speed, obviously compared to a hammer, is pretty impressive as well. So, which is obviously the main reason they've designed it. So, yeah.
How much time do you reckon you've saved by using this versus the other one?
I did a bit of a trial. This particular fence here has about 9 staples in it, and with the hammer that took me about a minute 40 seconds, and with this gun here, it took me about a minute less, so about 40 seconds. So when you add that up over, this bit here is a 200 metre fence line, which if my maths are any good, it might take you an hour to hammer the staples in, but with this I reckon it'd take you around 15 minutes. So even in a short bit of fence like this, you could definitely see the benefits of it. Yeah, it would really appeal obviously to contractors and stuff. I think that'd be a no-brainer for them, or large-scale farmers who do a lot of their own fencing. But I think even for a small setup like us, we've sort of tried to be pretty self-sufficient with our own gear and do our own fencing and stuff. So the fencing normally gets done in amongst other jobs. So being able to just go and bang up the staples in half an hour, compared to a full afternoon or whatever, I think definitely has big merits. So, and it's that same old saying, isn't it? Work smarter, not harder, Scotty, which you could probably appreciate.
Oh, I'm a big fan of that. Well, thanks for joining us on Rural New Zealand. I certainly hope you enjoyed the show. Just remember to give us a like on Facebook, and if you're silly enough to miss an episode, you can watch it on demand. Catch you guys next time when we're in Hamner Springs and we're doing a spotter tailing. See you guys then.